Hey, welcome back, American Government class. Hope you had a great weekend. It is Monday, May 17th, 2021, and oh my God, school's almost over. We are like that close. What do we got? We got today, we got Wednesday, we got Friday, and then we got Tuesday of next week, and that's it for government class. Four government classes. So we're going to go ahead and skip the last class review for 5 seconds. We'll come back to it, but we're going to talk about our upcoming classes. You guys have been doing a phenomenal job. It's been a weird year, to say the least. We have so much more information that we have to cover. And we got 4 classes too. And that 4th class is the final. So here's what we're going to do. We're still going to have the final on the 4th day. All right? Got to do it. I'm sorry. Going to cover all the information from the whole year. Day before, we would normally do a study guide review in class. We're not going to do any kind of video with a study guide. We're going to keep talking about government stuff. I'm going to send you a study guide, though, very shortly. That way you have a study guide to start looking at some things, to start remembering what we've talked about this entire year, and you can prepare for the final on our last day, which is Tuesday, for this class, our last day. That means we got 2 days left to talk about the rest of the executive branch and the entire judicial branch. Now, we're clearly not going to be able to do that because we took a little bit more time than I, probably should have led us with the project the past 4 days, but that's one of the funner parts of this class. And even though we didn't get to work in groups and we didn't get to have elections, I wanted you to be able to have that little project for yourself. If it comes at the expense of not knowing as much about the judicial branch, so be it. But that's kind of the deal for upcoming classes, all right? We only got 4 left, including today's. So they're going to be longer classes. Make sure you give me your work. If it's a little bit past midnight, that's okay. Just make sure you give me the work. It's very important. We're going to have a lot. You might notice the classes are going to be kind of longer. They're going to be on the long end. They won't be the 4 or 5 minute classes that we sometimes get. That being said, last class review. Let's start this class off. Great job with the speeches. Great job with the posters. Great job with the bumper stickers and the profiles. I really wish we could have been in class and in school for that. I missed it. I don't know if you guys remember it in past years, but it's been a lot of fun. I wish we could have done it in school, but you guys did a phenomenal job given the circumstances that we were in. Loved listening, reading those speeches. You guys did a fantastic job. The posters were great. If you're coming back next year, if you're coming through the school and want them hung up on the walls, bring them with you. I'll certainly hang them up in the classroom with the other ones. You guys deserve that. Now today, told you, jam-packed class, we're going to talk about 2 things. The Electoral College and the Vice President. Very important stuff, all right? It's basically a 2-day process that we're going to jam into 1 day. The good news here is that since we're cramming everything in, I'm not going to give you a test on the executive branch. You'll just get tested on that stuff on the final, on Tuesday of next week. So go ahead, take a look at your email. I sent you 2 sheets today. One's titled the Electoral College. One is titled the Vice Presidency. Let's open up the Electoral College one first. I'm going to have some notes on the board. You just fill out the notes on your sheets. We'll start with the Electoral College, and we'll go to the Vice President, and then we'll be done for the day. I'll give you your assignment and attendance, and we'll move on to Wednesday's class. All right, so the Electoral College. Strange, but true. If you recall, we spoke about the Electoral College a few times in the past. We've talked about it in our road to the White House. We talked about it way back in January when we had the riots and the event that happened at the Capitol building when we were trying to certify election results. But this is kind of a small, brief overview on the Electoral College. Should be kind of a review of some of the things we've talked about. But if not, no worries, but still very important stuff. Make sure you have the paper, and you'll see that we start with November. And very easy, first topic. November, it's as simple as citizens vote for a presidential candidate's electors. Now remember, that's to say we do not vote for a president necessarily. We vote for that president's electors. Everybody always thinks, oh, I'm voting for Donald Trump. I'm voting for Joe Biden. I mean, kinda, yeah, but the way our system works is you're voting for a certain number of people to vote for that person for you. And in fact, I've gotten our ballot here that I've showed you guys a few times. If we take a look And remember, this is from 2012, so it's a long time ago, but we see our presidential, it doesn't even say presidential candidate, it says presidential electors. It has the candidates right here, Romney and Ryan, Obama and Biden. You're connecting the arrows here, but you're voting for these people. You see all these names next to them? See if we can zoom it in just a little bit more for you. So Don Ascioli and Malcolm Barrett and Paul Gilbert. Those are the electors for Romney and Ryan, all these people. These are the electors for Obama and Biden. And that's one of the main things that people don't understand in our country about the election. We're not voting for a presidential candidate. We're voting for these people to vote for a candidate on our behalf. Remember, this goes back to us being a republic. Don't know why I'm using air quotes. It's actually a republic. We have people vote for us. So that's the first part of today's notes. Let's see what's next. Now, the next item when it comes to the Electoral College is that it is a winner-takes-all system. And what do we mean by that? Very simple. The first note that you should write down is the winner of a popular vote in a state gets all of that state's electoral votes. So remember, there's the popular vote, the electoral vote. When we're talking about popular vote, we're just talking about the number of people. Your normal vote. If you have 5 people, hey, 3 voted yes, 2 voted no. That's a popular vote. So much larger scale because we have many more than 5 people living in a state. But whoever gets the most votes of the people, that candidate gets that state's electoral votes, all of them. So for an example, Arizona, we have 11 total electoral votes, 9 for our members of the House and 2 for our senators, so we have 11 total. Whoever gets the most votes in our state, the popular vote, the most votes amongst the people, gets that state's complete electoral votes. All 11 of them go to that candidate. Now this is the case across the United States, except in Maine and Nebraska. And they actually break it down by counties and states. And hey, well, this area gets 2 votes for Biden, and this one gets 1 vote for Trump. And they just break it down on a much smaller level. That's the only places where it's not a winner-take-all system. Now, speaking of popular vote and electoral vote, in the years 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and just as recently as 2016, the winner of the popular vote in America, meaning across the United States, the person who got the most votes did not win the election. That means 2016, maybe you guys remember that. Most of you were, you were all alive. Most of you were using your brains at that time. We had Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton actually scorched him in the amount of votes that she got. She had like 1 million more votes across the country. But because of this old tricky Electoral College, she didn't win the presidency. How? How can that happen? We'll dive into that a little bit today. But it also happened in 2000, 1888, 1876, and 1824. Basically, to give you a quick gist of it, that means they got a lot of votes in states where there weren't a lot of Republican votes. Let's say Hillary got a lot of votes in New York and California. So many. And then in the states where it was close, let's say that there were 5,000 votes in, Wyoming, Donald Trump might have gotten 2,501, and Hillary got 2,499. So she only lost by 2 votes there, but it's a winner-take-all system, so Donald Trump got all of those states' electoral votes, and those popular votes basically meant nothing for Hillary Clinton. That's why you'll hear a lot of times people say, it's not good if you're a Democrat in Texas, your vote doesn't count. Or if you're a Republican in California, your vote doesn't count. It still counts, but it's really hard to make a difference since it is a winner-take-all system. Now, as far as the number of electors go, well, this should all be reviewed. There are 538 total electors. We have 100 for members of the Senate. We have 435 for members of the House of Representatives. And then that extra 3, don't forget about that extra 3. 3 for Washington, D.C. Remember, they are a district. They don't have senators. They don't have members in the House of Representatives. Do people live there? Yeah, but they don't really get a say in this. They just get those 3 electoral votes towards the presidency. And remember, 3 is the minimum that you can have. Every state has at least 3. So even states with a lot less people than there are in Washington, D.C., they'll have 3 electoral votes. A state like Wyoming or North Dakota, those are states with small populations that don't have any more than 3 electoral votes. Now, of that 538, we said this last time, the magic number is 270. Why 270? Because a candidate must get a majority of electoral votes to win the presidency. Remember, a majority is 1 more than half. So if you take this 538, divide it in half, and add 1 to it, guess what you're getting? Boom, 270. So that's why on election nights, if you recall, it was just a race to 270. I should say election night and the following election day number 2, day number 3, day number 4. It was who was going to get to 270 first. And we're actually going to take a quick look at an interactive map right now to show you just exactly how this works. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so what you have here is a pretty cool thing that you can find online just by going to Electoral College interactive map. But this is the result of our most recent election that took place last year in 2020. You'll see that all of these states have their state abbreviation and then underneath a number. What do you think that number is? Well, you see Arizona with 11. Hopefully you're realizing that that's our number of electoral votes. And this is how the election turned out. Remember, blue is typically associated with Democrats and red is typically associated with Republicans. Up top here, we see how many electoral votes Biden had, 306, how many Trump had, 232. So Biden clearly won. 270 was the magic number. This little arrow shows you where 270 is. But let's take a quick look at this map and see how things could have changed. Remember, we say 270 to win. Things could have easily gone a different way. Now, one thing you might notice right off the bat, Nebraska is all red except for 1 blue, and Maine is all blue except for 1 red, and that goes back to the whole majority winner-takes-all thing that we were talking about. It's the same in all the states except for those 2. Here, Nebraska had 4 electoral votes for Donald Trump, 1 for Biden, and Maine had 3 electoral votes for Biden, 1 for Trump. But with this map, we can see how things would change. So, for example, Arizona was a very contested state. That was one of the states they had to recount all of these ballots. If we click on Arizona, it makes it undecided. If we click again, it turns it to red, and boom, Donald Trump is now at 243, Biden's at 295. Another major state was Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has 20 electoral votes. If we just change this to red, boom, now Trump is only 7 votes away. He's at 263, Biden's at 275. Finally, one of the other highly contested states was this little guy down here, Georgia. Take a look. It's the only state in the South, in the entire southern United States, at least on this eastern side, that went blue or for Joe Biden. If we click on that, completely different election. Biden doesn't get to 259. Trump has 279. He gets past the 270 magic number, and he would be president again. Now, the key here is that in those 3 states, the election was really close. In California, wasn't that close. A lot of people vote in blue. Same with New York. A lot of people vote in blue. Texas, a lot of people vote in red. Most of the southern states, a lot of people voting for Donald Trump. And that's where you can see this historical event where someone gets way more votes than the other person in the popular election. The popular vote, they just dominate the other person. They get 1 million more votes. But since it's so close in these contested states, for example, Georgia, I think it was, roughly 1,000 votes difference. Same with Arizona. It was so close
that if it had sprung this way, all of those states' electoral votes go to the other person. As instead, we had Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona go for President Joe Biden, and he became the President of the United States. Now let's wrap up these Electoral College notes.
All right, now finally, the what ifs. We took a look at that electoral map. Mr. Wackpaw, I'm really good with numbers. I crunched them real quick, and I realized if these states vote red and these states vote blue, you could have a tie. First of all, if you said that, I'd say you are very fast, very smart, and you should not be in this government class. You should be at MIT or Harvard doing something more challenging than this high school government class. But that is a great question. What if no candidate gets to 270? The way that it breaks down, it certainly could happen. You could have a tie, I believe at 269 and 269. Well, my friends, if no candidate gets to that magic number of 270, the House of Representatives, that's right, the House, the lower house, not the more prestigious, not the one with the more media coverage, just the one with more people, they pick the president. And it goes one vote per state, meaning you will have a total of 50 votes. Each state gets together with their House members and they say, all right, who are we going to vote for as a state? And usually whoever has the most votes amongst those members of the House wins. Let's say there's 11 in Arizona. If 5 of them wanted to vote for the Democratic candidate and the other 6 wanted to vote for the Republican candidate, those 11 electoral votes are going to go to the Republican candidate. But Mr. Wackbaugh, there's 50 United States. What if it's like 25 and 25? We're so smart. I love the thoughts going through your head. Well, my friends, that is another what if. If no candidate can get 25 or a majority of House votes, you know what they do? This is brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. They just keep voting. They say, it's 25-25. All right, well, let's vote again. And guess what? If it goes to 25 and 25, guess what they do with a second time? They just keep voting. But this is where it gets really interesting. If 3 straight times it goes 25-25, the 4th time, they just keep voting. So they will stay there all night voting until a candidate gets a majority of House votes. Meanwhile, back in the Senate, they are voting for the vice president. That's right, at 1 vote per senator. And since you are all very astute government students, you know that there are 100 senators. So, my friends, 100 votes. And you could hypothetically, don't get ahead of me, I see you over there, you're thinking about it. You could hypothetically have members of the House of Representatives vote for, let's say, a Republican candidate for president, and the Senate could vote for a Democratic candidate for vice president. This is not out of the realm of possibility. You could certainly have a Republican president and a Democratic vice president, or a Democratic president and a Republican vice president. I'm sure that would go over great. I'm sure right now if we had Donald Trump and Kamala Harris together, that would work out really well. Or if we had Joe Biden and the old guy, what's his name? Mike Pence, that would work out great too. Anyway, that is it for the Electoral College notes. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Vice President notes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and now for the finale of today's class, the Vice President note sheet. I figured since it's already been a long class, I'll save you a little bit of time and just go over the notes with you on the sheet itself. So first and foremost, question should be an easy review. How is the Vice President chosen? Well, simple. Selected by the presidential candidate at the nominating convention. Now remember, sometimes this happens a little bit earlier. Most of these conventions, you know who the vice presidential candidate is going to be, and they will usually give a speech the night before the presidential candidate does, or maybe even 2 nights before. Now, as far as the limited formal duties, we're talking here about what the vice president is required to do via the Constitution. And we spoke about this earlier in the year as well. The number one thing is very simple. They preside over the Senate. Now that just means they're in charge of the Senate. However, they don't vote with the Senate every single day on every single law. If you recall, when do they vote? They vote in the case of a tie. If it's ever 50-50 or 49-49, or let's say there were only 80 senators at work that day and it was 40-40, the vice president gets to come on in, and according to the Constitution, they get to break the tie. And then finally, the second thing the vice president gets to do according to the Constitution is they help decide whether the president is disabled and acts as the president if this happens. So if the president ever gets too old, too sick, or has some type of disease, something happens to the president, there's a group of people, the vice president being one of them, who helps decide, hey, this president can no longer do it. We have to remove them basically from the presidency, and I will become president. Now, when it comes to a traditional view of the vice presidency, it is pretty simple. It's not that important. That's what people always thought. They said it's not a real job. They've said there's no real power. In fact, there's a joke that people say that there were two brothers, and one brother went on to be vice president, and one went on to be a seaboat captain that got lost at sea, and neither were ever heard from again. And that's because the idea is that once you become the vice president, that's where you go to basically die. You have no power, you have no job. John Adams, one of our original vice presidents and one of our original presidents, one of the founding fathers, said basically that there was no job that was created that was ever less powerful and less meaningful. Now that was back in the 1700s and the 1800s. The reality, if we go down another level, is that it is absolutely a heartbeat away from the presidency. And what do we mean by that? Well, the vice president assumes the presidency if the president dies, resigns, is impeached and found guilty, or can no longer fulfill their responsibilities. So they are a heartbeat away, basically, meaning if the president dies or if something happens to the president, they are next in line. They move to the presidency. It is a very possible thing that has happened many of times in our country's history, most notably with assassinations, specifically JFK. He was assassinated right after, and I mean right after, they swore in the vice president, LBJ, to become the president of the United States. Now, this is a good time to tell you about a little trivia question where I can tell you, or I would ask you, how long can a person possibly be president for? And because you guys are all smart government students, you would say, 8 years, Mr. Weckbob. They could win 2 terms. 1 term is 4 years long, so 8 years. Well, my friends, that would be wrong, because according to the 22nd Amendment, it allows for the possibility of being president for 10 years. Now, how would that happen? Well, if something happened to the president, if they were to become incapacitated, die, be impeached and found guilty, and there were less than 2 years remaining of that term, the vice president would become president for those final 2 years, and then could hypothetically run for president 2 more times. They had not been president before. They did not run for president, so they could still fulfill the 2-term limit, have 4 years each of 8 years total, plus the 2 years where they were sworn in as president after the president died or was impeached and found guilty. However, if it's very early on in that president's term, for example, if it's in year 1 and the president dies or is impeached and removed, that means the vice president would become president for the final 3 years. And since you can't be president for more than 10 years, they could hypothetically run and be elected, but those 4 years would take them to 7. And if they wanted to run for another term, those 4 years would take them to 11, so they would not be allowed to run for president for a second term. So the idea here is that the maximum that you could be president is 10 years, but that would only happen if you took over as a vice president for a president who could no longer do the job. Now, what happens if there's a vice presidential vacancy? What if the vice president dies or is impeached and removed? Well, very simply put, we have another amendment for that, and that is the 25th Amendment. And in the 25th Amendment, the president nominates a new candidate. They get to pick whoever they want. However, this person must be confirmed by a simple majority vote of both houses of Congress. That means we don't have a 2/3 vote or a 3/4 vote. It's just a simple, do you get one more than half of the people that are there voting? So 51 in the Senate and 218, is that right, in the House? If the full number of people are there, basically just one more than half have to vote yes. Now, when it comes to the vice president today, we told you about the traditional view, how it was seen in the past. That is no longer the case. This was back in the day, all those old fogies. The vice president today is an incredibly and powerful and important position. It is used as a stepping stone to the presidency. Now, a stepping stone, you know what that is. It leads you somewhere. So a lot of times today, if you become the vice president, people look at you to be the next president. So right now, the president is Joe Biden, but people are looking at the vice president, Kamala Harris, and saying, hey, she's probably, after Joe runs his course as president, people are probably going to put her up on the Democratic ticket. If Donald Trump would have won last year and served his final 4 years as president, people would have looked at then Vice President Mike Pence to become a presidential candidate. So a lot of times this is what you see. The vice president is seen as someone who will take over the presidency. However, they also help balance the ticket. Remember, we talked about this. You need a good vice presidential candidate to help you get elected as president. If you are old, you want someone young. If you are white, you may want a person of color. If you are not in the military, you might want someone with a military background. If you are a male, you might want a female. If you are from an East Coast state, you may want a vice presidential candidate from a West Coast state. Helps balance the ticket, which all in all helps someone get elected, so it's a very important position now as well. Finally, the vice president represents the president at home and abroad in many different meetings. If the president can't make it, a lot of times they'll send the vice president on their behalf. So there's a lot of responsibility here. You don't just go to a meeting and say, yep, nope, yep. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know what the president wants and what that current administration is willing to do and the views of it so you can represent them clearly. So hopefully you can see that today, in today's age, the vice president is very important. They're a heartbeat away from having a heartbeat, meaning, they could surely be the president in a matter of moments. I know a lot of this was reviewed, but hopefully it clears a lot of things up for you guys and gives you a little bit more info on the second highest ranking official in the executive branch.
Whew, that was a lot of notes, but great job. You got it done. We are done for the day. Very simple assignment for you since you had to sit through all those notes. Just send a picture of both sets of your notes. If you took them on your phone, cool, send them in that way. If you wrote them down, take a picture of them that way. If you did it on your computer, cool, take a picture of them, send them in to me. That's all you got to do for today's class. If you have any questions, as always, I'm here. Shoot me an email. If not, we will see you guys on Wednesday to hopefully cover a little bit more of the executive branch and a whole lot more of the judicial branch. Take care.